Maintenant, la séance.
I call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 104 of the Committee on Canadian Heritage. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people.
Going to be a hybrid meeting. And so everyone who is going to be appearing virtually will log on to Zoom. But remember, you're not allowed to take pictures of the Zoom or of the meeting. So the other thing is that you're not mandated to wear masks, but it would be nice if you could, because we hear from the Ontario Chief Health Officer that in fact people are going to get very sick and there's going to be hospitals are already beginning to fill up. So just remember that. I also want everyone to know that please, when you want to address any questions or answers, please go through the chair, and also be careful with your sound, because the echoing on any other thing that you have in front of you could cause problems to the interpreters who could get feedback, and that would be very negative for them. So today we are meeting as requested with the Minister of Sport, the Honourable Carla Qualtrough, and she is the Department of Canadian Heritage officials are with her. Isabelle Mondoux, Deputy Minister of Canadian Heritage, Emmanuel Sajou, Assistant Deputy Minister of Sport, Public Health Agency of Canada, Nancy Hamzawi, and Executive Vice President, and Michael Collins, Vice President, Health Promotion and Chronic Disease Prevention Branch. So, without any further ado, welcome, Minister. It's so nice to see you here. And congratulations on a portfolio I know that you feel very at home in, having been an Olympian yourself. All right, so we will begin with you. You have 10 minutes, Minister.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to join you. Chair, just to put it on the record, I'm happy to stay to make up for the time we've lost. So if that works for you all, I can stay the whole hour, or I'll leave it to you guys to figure that out, but I'm happy to stay. So I'd like to begin as well by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Quel plaisir pour moi de rencontrer.
It's a pleasure to meet with the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage to discuss my mandate as Minister of Sport and Physical Activity. Our government acted quickly to protect Canadians during the COVID-19 pandemic and put many measures in place to ensure Canadians could look after their families and pay their bills. As per my mandate, we have since worked to build back following the impacts of the pandemic and to harness the power of sport for the benefit of more Canadians.
I turn to this role at a time where Canada's sports system is at a critical crossroads. My own experience as an athlete has taught me firsthand the positive power and potential of sport. But we've also seen over and over again that with insufficient safeguards and accountability, sport can also do harm. I want to acknowledge the survivors who have bravely come forward to bring to light their lived experiences, including during this committee's study on safe sport. I admire their courage, and what happened should never have happened, and I'm committed to ensuring that they are supported. Regarding the Safe Sport Report, I commend the work of this committee to date and look forward to seeing its completion and your recommendations. As a key part of my mandate, yesterday I announced the creation of an independent and impartial Future of Sport in Canada Commission. This commission will launch in the new year. The commission will provide a forum to bring the lived experience of victims and survivors to light and support healing and engage broadly on how to improve the sport system in Canada. The Commission will be trauma-informed, survivor-centred, and human rights-based. I also strongly believe that athletes must have a voice in changing Canada's sports system. To that end, we'll continue to make capacity-building investments in Athletes Can to enhance the role of athletes in the sports system. We are also elevating the Sport Canada Athlete Advisory Committee to the ministerial level. In January, we will reopen a call to athletes to participate in this committee. The committee will provide me with athlete input and perspectives directly on sport policy and programming. To ensure greater independence, we will begin to transition the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner and the Abuse-Free Sport Program out of the Dispute Resolution Centre of Canada. Now, we all recognize, Madam Chair, that sport is vital to leading healthy lifestyles. My mandate makes it clear that sport should be promoted as a means of encouraging Canadians, especially children and youth, to integrate and increase physical activity in their daily lives. Even before the pandemic, less than half of adults, children, and youth met the current physical activity recommendations, and sedentary behavior was on the rise. We need to do more to help Canadians get moving and live healthy and active lifestyles. I'll continue to work with our partners, including provincial and territorial governments and organizations throughout the Canadian sports system, to enhance opportunities for all Canadians to participate in sport. This means also working to ensure that underrepresented communities have better access to positive sport and physical activity opportunities, like we are doing through the Community Sport for All initiative. Through this program, we are supporting community sport initiatives for equity-deserving groups, in particular Black, Indigenous, 2S LGBTQ+, people with disabilities, and newcomers, to remove barriers and increase participation and retention in sport. Notre gouvernement cherche toujours.
Our government has always made increasing diversity a priority to ensure all of our systems reflect the diversity of Canada. Sport is no exception. I will continue working to ensure that the Canadian sport and physical activity systems reflect the diversity of our country. I look forward to continuing to promote physical activity and to encourage all Canadians, especially children and youth, to integrate and increase physical activity in their daily lives.
We announced $10 million over 2 years for Participaction's Let's Get Moving initiative to increase physical activity levels of Canadians who are less active, with a focus on groups that experience health inequalities related to physical activity. We are also supporting the development of the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology's 24-hour movement guidelines, which provide guidance on the optimal amount of physical activity, sedentary behavior, and sleep requirements for people of all ages. We'll continue working with stakeholders with expertise in physical activity and health and not-for-profit organizations supporting equity-deserving populations. This includes through the Healthy Living Roundtables, for which a What We Heard report has been shared with stakeholders and will be posted online shortly. We're also taking action to address physical inactivity. Through the Healthy Canadians and Communities Fund, we are providing approximately $20 million annually to reduce health inequalities among priority populations at greater risk of chronic diseases. Je continuerai à travailler en étroite collaboration avec mes homologues provinciaux.
I will continue to work closely with provincial and territorial ministerial colleagues to coordinate efforts on increasing physical activity, recreation, and active and healthy living across the country. To support safety in physical activity and sport, our government is supporting the update of the Canadian Guideline on Concussion in Sport and other concussion resources to ensure that everyone in Canada has the most current guidance on the prevention, assessment, and management of sport-related concussion.
Will be included in this process. In addition, the updated guideline will be used by national, provincial, and territorial sport organizations to update their own concussion protocols. Looking ahead, I believe we have an unprecedented opportunity to develop recommendations to advance the objectives of the new Canadian sport policy. We anticipate having this new policy endorsed by all provinces and territories in 2024. The policy, which is driven by values including safe sport, is a product of comprehensive coast-to-coast engagement with Canadians. Sessions were held to ensure we heard from all voices across the sport and recreation system. However, there is still more work for us to do to ensure that every Canadian, regardless of age, disability, race, ethnicity, or gender, can easily and safely participate in sport. All these efforts progress over the coming months, and I know that I can count on your support and advice and candid feedback, I would say, and I look forward to our ongoing collaboration. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're now moving to the question and answer section, and remember that this is we start with a 6-minute round. And remember, the 6 minutes is for the question and the answer. So I begin with for the Conservatives, Martin Shields. No, sorry, for the Conservatives, Rachel Thomas. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong page.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, thank you for taking the time to be here and for making yourself available for an additional amount of time today, given the special circumstances. My first question here is with regards to Hockey Canada. As you know, on June 22nd, 2022, funding was suspended, and there were 3 criteria that were put in place in order to have that federal funding reinstated. It was reinstated only a short 10 months later. I'm curious if, in your estimation, those 3 criteria were fully met before the funding was restored.
Thank you. So Hockey Canada was sufficiently advanced at the time. So Hockey Canada has published its financial statements, has signed on to the UCCMS, and has undertaken an independent governance review. They are actively implementing the recommendations, and Sport Canada is working very closely with them. I think, yes, I would say. Now, I'm not congratulating them, though, please.
Okay. One of the things that you did that also was required of them was that they would make available the Heinen-Hutchinson report and the recommendations that are in there. Has your office received a copy of that?
Sure, do we?
Yes, we received a copy of the report.
Okay, perfect. One of the other stipulations was that there would be ongoing reporting with the government, and so I'm curious as to whether or not that ongoing reporting is in fact taking place and how often.
It is happening quarterly, so every 3 months Hockey Canada is meeting with us to report on advancing the different aspects of the Cromwell report.
Okay, and what is the nature of that reporting when they meet with you? Is there a set agenda or items that they're supposed to report?
Yes, there is a monitoring plan, and in the monitoring plan, they have to show how they progress in the implementation of the report. So they have to show clear progress into every single recommendation.
Okay, perfect. And to date, you've been satisfied with the reports that have been given?
I think, as the minister said, it's a work in progress, but so far they're doing the work.
Okay, thank you. I'm also curious with regards to the announcement that you made yesterday, Minister. I know there was quite a bit in that announcement. One of the questions that I have for you is it has to do with a registry among national sports organizations with regards to sanctions. Now, we've heard from many victims here at this committee, whether it's from soccer, gymnastics, hockey, fencing, boxing, swimming, volleyball, you name it, right? There's many dozens of sports organizations across this country where there are athletes that have been mistreated and, of course, have grave concerns. One notable victim who spoke here at this committee was Ms. McCormick. And she said this, she said, "How can you literally witness this car crash over and over again and do nothing?" Another thing she said to this committee, she said, "Yet inexplicably was allowed," she's talking about Soccer Canada, the coach, he was allowed by Canada Soccer to continue coaching teenage girls for 12 years. I and others reported this known predator repeatedly to no avail. Andrea Neal said this, "Canada Soccer didn't act to protect the community. They negligently shifted his predatory behavior on and shrouded the reason for his departure, so he was back coaching vulnerable girls just weeks later." Now, of course, the reference here is to Bob Berarda. This is a really sad case. I mean, this is an individual who sexually assaulted numerous girls within soccer. And it seems that nothing was done about it. And so these girls were left feeling voiceless, powerless, defeated. My question for you is, will you be creating a registry for these national sports organizations to report sanctions?
The short answer is yes, but I can give you more details if you'd like.
Can you give me a date?
I can't give you a date. So we're working currently with the Privacy Commissioner to see, to make sure that, I'm so with you on the unacceptableness of this that it's hard for me not to say tomorrow. But with the kind of PT, FPT world, and we've got provinces on board to put their plans by the end of this year on how we would coordinate the provincial sanctions with the 06 sanctions, but we're not quite there yet. So when is it? I can't read that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry.
It says March 24th. There you go. There's
March
the date.
24th of this year?
Of next year, like 2024.
Sorry, that's what I mean, of 2024,
Yeah.
the coming year.
March 2024 for the register that is the national one that is with the Abuse for Sport program. They're working now with the privacy commissioner to make sure that it's okay,
Right.
but technically they should be
Perfect.
in
The
place.
PT part will come after
The
that.
party
Yeah, that's
part,
the
they're
I have in my
working on
head.
it. That's what you were mentioning, Minister.
Thank you. Sorry. There you go.
Okay, so with regards to provincial sanctions then, would there be a registry required there as well?
Well, right now we're trying to figure out the best way. We don't want to duplicate efforts and have 14 different registries, so the preference would be to have one. But PTs have to get on board, and we're having an FBT meeting, I think, February to discuss this. But yeah, it's a massive problem within sport how bifurcated this jurisdiction is.
So if provincial sports organizations were told that they could not send athletes to national sports organizations unless they had a sanctions list, a registry,
30 seconds.
would that not do the trick?
Yeah, I think the question is if we obligated members of NSOs to have, be part of a system that had a registry, and that's what I'm looking at doing. Because that's how you get at them, right? They're members of the organization that we fund.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. To the Liberals, Lisa Hepner, for 6 minutes, please, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister and officials, for being here with us today. I think that's great news, March 2024, with this registry. Minister, is there anything more you can tell us about how this registry will work? Is this something... how do the names get added? Is it something that requires a criminal conviction for somebody who's been accused of something to add to that list? Is
No,
it going to be accessible across the country? Maybe you could just go into more detail about how you envision
it's based on signatories to the Universal Code of Maltreatment and Universal Code of Conduct and Maltreatment in Sport, which I will now call UCCMS, so I don't waste all my time. So if an individual has been sanctioned under that code of conduct, then they will appear on the registry. As of this April, every funded organization by the Sport Canada is now required and has signed on to the code. So we now capture all of those organizations under the code. What isn't yet part of that would be anybody who's been accused or perhaps in the process of an investigation, which is the knot I'm currently trying to track, is how we can remove people from the sport context during that investigatory period, because anyway, we're trying to figure that part out, but definitely the sanctioning part.
And I want to go back to your announcement yesterday. You've announced a commission model to look into safe sport rather than a public inquiry. Would you explain to this committee why you made that decision? What factors went into it?
Well, I can assure you all that it wasn't a decision that was made lightly, and it was made after a massive kind of individual on my part consultation with sport organizations, survivors, athletes groups, athletes, people from within sport, experts from outside of sport, the Canadian Women's Foundation, the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, asking for desired outcomes, really getting a handle on principles that they want to see reflected in the terms of reference for whatever mechanism we put in place. What became very clear was that it had to be trauma-informed, victim-centered, human rights respecting, and forward-looking. Taking all of that input, we researched different models that are out there, fell on three that I particularly leaned into, which was the Dublin Inquiry, Roy Romano's Inquiry into the Future of Health, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Looking at a public inquiry model, I believe that it is counter to the trauma-informed, victim-focused, victim-centered aspects of the principles that we are trying to move forward with this.
Could you just explain that a little bit more? Why would an inquiry not be victim-informed?
I know, and I know you all have dug in on this, and I absolutely respect the work that you've done. Compelling evidence, compelling witnesses, being able to cross-examine victims concerns me, especially because the starting point of this commission is not out to prove that bad things happened in sport. We are stipulating that bad things, we are starting from the position that bad things happen, that we believe survivors, we believe victims, we want to make the system better. And so we didn't want to put athletes, victims in particular, in the compromised position of being compelled to testify. And then, of course, there's the very practical reality of when you have a public inquiry in an area that is mostly provincial jurisdiction, you have to negotiate the terms of reference with the provinces and territories, which could add another year to the process. And I can't guarantee that every province and territory would agree. And where would that leave us? So I landed on the Truth and Reconciliation model because it served a vulnerable population that was previously traumatized, and a system that did not protect them, was forward-looking, was expressly not a public inquiry, did not compel evidence and witness. So it felt to me and to us as a government that that was the best way forward to achieve the outcome that we want, which is better, safer sport.
There are victims who feel that a public inquiry recommendations have more weight at the end and are more easily implemented than those coming from a commission. What's your response to that?
I'm not sure that's the case, although once again, I wouldn't want to disagree because I have the utmost respect for everybody who's shared their stories so we could get to today. I think the nature of the recommendation of this impartial, independent commission led by a respected legal expert will have the weight and gravitas that it needs to get the desired result.
How do we know that survivors and victims have been heard in this process?
It's a good question. I hope that, well, I can tell you that many athletes groups have come out in support of this commission. And I hope that those that still remain concerned or still lack the trust, and by the way, we have to re-earn their trust, will at least see their input, the outcomes that they wanted, the principles that they wanted us to uphold, the composition of the commission being led by an independent individual from outside of sport. The things that they said mattered no matter what process we put in place are in this one. So I'm hoping that, if they see part of what if they see what they said they wanted in this, even though it's not the model they thought that they needed to achieve these things, that they will start to believe again in the system.
Over the last couple of years, this committee has been studying safe sport. Is that useful to you? And would it be helpful if we could actually produce a report to help in the
Oh,
work?
absolutely. And in fact, the reason I can confidently say we can start from a place that bad things happen in sport is because of the work that your committee and the other committee did. Over 2 years, hundreds of witnesses, thousands of pages of testimony, submissions. We're not where we were in Dublin, right? In Dublin, we hadn't had 2 parliamentary committees when we started on. A part of the Dublin inquiry was to uncover the extent of the problem. And like I said, because of all of this, we're there. But of course, your recommendations will matter to me and the government, but also to the commission.
I now go to the Bloc Québécois. Sébastien Lemire. Sébastien, 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Qualtrough, what you proposed yesterday doesn't express a will to deal with the experiences of survivors individually. I would like you to explain the procedures of the public inquiry. Clearly, supporters came out yesterday and supporters of Athlete Khan. This means that your response is more for them rather than for the Canadians who are asking for a public inquiry, when the other only people who have been blamed for months are the ones congratulating you today and yesterday. Because of that, I have reason to doubt your solutions. Now, how do you plan to concretely put an end to the problems in sports and frame the mechanisms and policies that you intend to implement? Because what we've seen for months now is that there's a machine protecting itself, and there's a culture of silence that has created toxic abuse. So by focusing on the model of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, this is preventing or protecting the wicked, so to speak. They don't have to testify. If this has gone on for 2 years, it's because the committee, the House had to force people to come and testify about the measures that they have taken and not taken. And I'm thinking particularly of Sports Canada that was silent for many years when they received testimonies. and they took no action. The independent public inquiry would have enabled us to look into the actions and inactions of Sports Canada, and the approach you have chosen will not provide the solution that was expected. Why did you choose such an easy road? Answer, that's a good question. I don't totally agree with your characterization of the facts. I am comfortable with the approach because it's really trauma-informed, and not only members of the sports community accepted. You had the Center for Child Protection, the Women's Foundation of Canada, those working in this field who are experts, who don't want victims to be re-traumatized. In my opinion, to oblige someone to come testify, a victim that has already been traumatized, that should not happen. I gave directives, and MPs understand that Sports Canada has to fully participate in this process. I'm ready to use all the tools at my disposal to make sure that members of the sports community participate. This commission will be led by an independent person from outside the sports community. Where I listened to you at this press conference yesterday, victims spoke. I think they still have things to say. What I would have liked to see is the other side, those who created the system and those protecting the system, the abusers who were hiding behind independent third-party inquiries. And this entire mechanism funded by national sports organizations that enables the machine to protect itself. The solutions proposed by Sports Canada have created more problems. My question, how do you intend to protect victims that want to testify? Because in parliamentary committee, these victims were protected. But conversely, in a commission, they will not be protected. And that's one of the problems. Will they receive this protection? Will they have freedom of speech? I doubt. Focus will be on the victims, re-victimization, instead on the aggressors and abusers, on a system that does not function. Will they be protected from their abusers? What will happen with publication bans that have been imposed on them over the years? Your question had several segments.
Non-disclosure agreements are no longer allowed. Every NSO has agreed as a condition of their funding that we do not permit NDAs anymore in sport. So those are off the table. If an athlete, a victim wants to participate in this process, they can do so in camera, privately with the commission. That's permitted in the terms of reference. Their personal information can be anonymized if they request, and they will be told that they have the right to have their personal information anonymized. Every victim will be supported in every engagement by mental health and other experts if have at their disposal, because we know that this will, has the potential to be very difficult. I would say I'm definitely putting the emphasis on protecting victims and survivors, but I'm no way letting sport off the hook on this. There will be systemic change that comes from this.
Vous avez mis le BCS en dehors.
You put the BCS out of this, but there's something lacking attaching it to the legal segment. How do you intend to legislate to make sure that concrete action can be taken, particularly through the tribunals? We continue working on that. I really wanted to say that we understand the issue of independence, conflict, trust that doesn't always exist because of the structure. We are now working to see what will happen.
But it will be housed independently, certainly independent from the sport tribunal, but most importantly, in a much more sophisticated relationship with authorities, I would say, le système de justesse.
Je comprends qu'il y a encore beaucoup de travail à faire. Merci.
I understand there's still a lot of work to be done. Thank you.
New Democratic Party and Matthew Green.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And through you to the Minister. Minister, I'm going to put a series of questions to you in a rather rapid way. If I take my time back, I'm not interrupting to be rude. I'm just trying to make the most out of it. So I will ask that you try to answer as concisely as you can and keep the answers to yourself unless I ask that it be directed to staff. We have a responsibility as MPs to bring voices into our committees. And this morning, I would like to bring the voice of the survivor and the perspective of the survivor, Ryan Sheehan, who says that, the announcement that was made yesterday was in fact a disappointment. Ryan states that the minister's premature celebrating of all the outcomes will be satisfactory to the survivors and stakeholders, and the commission has no subpoena powers. He talks about the fact that there aren't real kind of victim protections included in the public inquiry. Mentions the fact that they had to report their abuse to 7 different organizations, and feels like this is every other process. No safeguards, kind of flying by the seat of your pants, in the exact same way that the OSIC had no teeth and was against the wishes of survivors. So in close, they say that the minister apologized to survivors for not having a voice up until this point, and yet is turning her back on the single thing most survivors agreed upon, a public inquiry. How do you respond to that?
I'll start by saying I'm sorry for what Ryan went through, and I'm sorry that we're here. But what I can assure him is that I understand that we have to rebuild his trust in the system. I do think there are safeguards for victims and survivors in this process, some of which I've already mentioned, but I would encourage, I don't even know how to say it. I honestly believe that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission model is the best way to protect and support traumatized
Minister,
people.
Ryan states clearly in his correspondence to us that, he's not looking for other forums to simply tell stories, that they want something with teeth that is going to hold people accountable. And we know, given how reluctant sport organizations were to turn over key documents to this committee for testimony, how do you expect the commission to get meaningful evidence from them without the powers to subpoena testimony and compel documents for disclosure, as would a national inquiry?
Yeah, I hear you on that. And what I'll say is when you give subpoena power and the ability to compel evidence, you don't get to say who and what. So a commission could subpoena or compel the testimony of a victim. I'm very interested to hear what happened to you, come and talk about it, and then that victim could be cross-examined. That's why the TRC wasn't a public inquiry, and that's why I don't think this needs to be. I can finish.
Here.
I can respond.
No, I can reclaim my time.
Okay.
So, what we're talking about, and I stated specifically, parliamentary committees have the ability and the power to subpoena documents. These same organizations were reluctant to hand over documents to a standing committee of parliament, which has those powers. What makes you think they're going to treat this process any differently if they disrespected this process that we're going through here?
I hear you on that, and I guess I would reply that one of the things I have considered is I have, through funding, I have the ability to require organizations to behave in a certain way, and I've considered, and have not left off the table, by the way, requiring as a condition of funding that they participate fully. Having said that, I cannot get them to produce material that they believe is protected or in the course of another.
But you would agree that the House can. You would agree that we can.
Well,
and yet they wouldn't.
I don't know what I would be agreeing to there, so I apologize. But
You're not familiar with parliamentary privilege and our ability to send for documents and evidence?
I just don't know what you're asking me. You can re-ask.
I'll ask you another question because I see that you're hearing me, but perhaps you're not listening in this moment. There's no acknowledgement of investigating Own the Podium. So, they've called for this. They've called for Sport Canada. They've called for an investigation of SDRCC and NSOs. So what is included in the plan? Most athletes do not know the hand that these organizations have played in the culture of sport in Canada. And so, where are they going to be held accountable in all this?
Well, like as would happen if it had been a public inquiry, the Commission has the independence and impartiality to pursue whatever course to investigate the system. OTP is on the table, SDRCC is on the table, COC, Sport Canada I've already committed to is on the table. So they can choose to pull those threads, and I think they will and should. But again, I think I'd be criticized if I directed too much as well. So I will leave it at the discretion of the Commission to decide exactly how they pursue this.
So Sport Canada ultimately has the power in terms of accountability on this. Who's holding Sport Canada accountable for the part that they've played in the sports culture?
Well, I mean, Sport Canada's lever in terms of accountability is its funding mechanism, right? We're not a regulator, but in terms of digging in on Sport Canada, I mean, part of the announcement I made yesterday was a complete overhaul of the funding mechanism because I want more compliance, I want more accountability, I want Sport Canada to be digging in more, which I think they need to be doing, and they know that. That became very clear over the past 2 years. Sport Canada has committed to looking at not just its mandate, but also the relationships that individuals have within the sport community. So we're doing that internal work as well, but again, the Commission is absolutely free to make any recommendations it wants, and we'll take them very seriously.
Thank you. Your time is up. Mr. Green, I'm going to go to the second round. It's a 5-minute round, and so again, I caution that the 5 minutes includes questions and answers. We begin with the Conservatives, with Marilyn Ledoux. Marilyn, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the department witnesses and especially to the Minister for being here today. I'm very glad to see, Minister, that you've been put in this role because I've worked with you before and I know you are a person that will take action. And after 2 years of Pascal St. Onge doing nothing meaningful to address the very serious abuses in sport, we definitely needed to see this change. Now, some of the survivors that have spoken to me have expressed concern about the inquiry because they're worried that if it takes 18 months, it will delay action. And certainly from the two committees that studied, there have been a number of things that we heard that needed to be done right off the top, like vulnerable sector checks for everyone, coaches, volunteers, banning NDAs to protect perpetrators, the registry of offenders that you've already mentioned, and I was very pleased to see progress there. Reporting all sexual abuse to the police instead of having the organizations investigate themselves. So I saw in the announcement that you did yesterday, you said that the Commission was not the only thing that would happen, and you were going to be taking other actions. Could you give us some idea of what those might be?
Well, thank you, and thank you. I am very happy to be in this role. And I'm a systems thinker, and I'm a fixer, and I'm hoping that will come out of my time in this Commission, in this role. Listen, I think there's a ton of action that we can take right away. Yesterday, I announced, in addition to the Commission, 6 immediate actions. What was the Sport Canada Athlete Advisory Group is now a ministerial. I'm taking it directly to me. It's going to be advising me, an athlete advisory group. We are removing OSIC from the SDRCC because of the concerns around independence. We are striking an international work group to have countries get together, share best practices, and kind of talk about this at an international level. The vulnerable persons check, that's in the works. So again, it's always takes so much longer than we want because of the jurisdiction in this file. But definitely understand that is a key to streamlining the information. Like if I'm in a club in Alberta, I want to know if the coach that's come to that club from BC why did they leave the swim club in BC? And it's really hard to find out that information, even an engaged, sophisticated, never mind volunteer parent-driven board. So we're working on that. I can't remember all your questions. I apologize.
That's good. That's a great start.
Yeah.
Now, talking about the Commission, you've heard some of the survivors' concerns about the Commission, and I would say that the government doesn't have a great track record. If we think about the Emergency Measures Act inquiry, cost $125 million, came out with really nothing to see here, and now it's before the courts. The foreign interference inquiry that has just dragged and dragged and dragged and not really gotten anywhere. And then you said you modeled this one after the murdered and missing Aboriginal inquiry, which, if you recall, went on for years, and they had to replace all the commissioners ultimately, and there were concerns that not enough families, victims were heard from, and that once the recommendations came forward, nothing happened with them. So how is this going to be different than the previous?
Yeah, well, the TRC took a long time. You're absolutely correct, and we picked 18 months, partially, in to be honest, in response to the sport calendar, so to making sure we could encompass summer and winter calendars, because we know there's an Olympic and Paralympic Games next year. So we wanted to have enough time, but we didn't want it to drag on forever, so we settled on 18 months. Two of the features of this there'll be two reports, so a preliminary report with preliminary recommendations. Then there's going to be a national summit where people can weigh in on what the preliminary recommendations were, with people from inside and outside of sport, and then a final report informed by all of that. We're absolutely trying to strike a balance. I think in the meantime, there's a lot of work we can continue doing, especially some targeted measures we can put in place. The policy work we announced yesterday, we're going to advance child safeguarding policies. We're going to advance match manipulation policies. We're going to create a national integrity framework, which is basically we're going to put in one place all the integrity policies that we're expecting organizations to have, because right now they're everywhere. We're implementing a governance code for sport, so a best practice that they're going to have to, in many cases, they're going to have to overhaul their systems and their boards to adhere to this governance code. That's all happening while this other thing is happening, and I'm sure I'm missing some because we are doing a lot.
Quickly, one of the things that the survivors have said is that, it traumatizes them to be heard from again and again. And so you have the witness testimony from both committees. The survivors say there's not a lack of forums to tell our stories. There is a lack of space where someone can hold abusers and enablers accountable. And this commission doesn't solve that fundamental problem.
Thank you. We're
thank you
over time, Marilyn. So the minister might want to answer that if someone else asks her later on. I'm going to go with the Liberals. Andrew Dillon. Andrew, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our minister and everybody for being here today. So we've seen that a commission is preferred over a public inquiry. And could you tell us a little bit how the voices of survivors and athletes were taken into account in coming to this decision, please? Thank you.
Yeah, quickly. As I said, that was the first thing I did. I've met with, I've lost count of the number of organizations, and athletes directly, athlete groups, survivor groups, victims, individuals, organizations, inside of sport, outside of sport, internationally, people who have been very critical about the system, including the likes of Global Athlete, Gymnasts for Change, people who are working within the system, Alison Forsyth, Sheldon Kennedy, organizations of athletes in the system, Athletes Can, COC Athletes Commission, CPC Athletes Commission. So all that to say is, but very focused were my questions around what outcomes are you looking for, what type of, what needs to be in this process so that athletes will feel heard and so that victims and survivors will feel safe. Took all that in and came to this as the answer.
And can you please tell us what is the mandate of the commission and what activities will be conducted? Is there going to be a report, and if aspects of it will be public or some of them not disclosed?
So the mandate of the commission is twofold. One, to dig into and provide recommendations on actions that can be taken specific to safe sport. Like, what can we do? Mm-hmm. What kind of processes can we put in place to protect athletes when they disclose, to make sure the system supports them going through their healing journey? What is missing in the system, but then kind of recognizing that safe sport permeates every aspect of the system, a broader look at the sport system itself. Are there too many organizations with people wearing too many hats? Are there, I could give you a list of my own questions I would want answered if I was the commissioner, but fundamentally a broader review of the system. Again, as I said, 2 reports will be produced publicly. with information anonymized if that's what the witnesses want, with a national summit in between to have a national, to kind of raise the conversation again to the national level before recommendations are finalized.
Okay, and the terms specifically say that the Commission will be taking a trauma-informed approach. Can you please tell us a little bit about this, how it's going to be done?
Yeah, so, I mean, as I've learned, there's some very specific things we want to bake into a process to ensure that it's trauma-informed. So this is, first of all, recognizing that people come into this process having been hurt, having been harmed, and are all on different different stages of their journey. So for me, it was very important to build in not only kind of the language of trauma-informed, but actually process-related. So having mental health support, having experts on hand during engagement so that people can talk to somebody if this brings up anxieties or feelings of distress, making sure the data can be anonymized, giving people many different ways to contribute, obligating victim impact statements. So the Commission has to make an opportunity for victims to do victim impact statements. There'll be an online survey. There'll be an online portal for Canadians to make submissions. Just doing whatever we can to get the information in the least traumatizing way. And, giving people choice, giving people empowerment, making sure that we understand that the people are at the center of this.
And you've also announced that instead of waiting for the recommendations of the Commission, you want to take immediate action. And this includes a Future of Sport Commission and immediate actions that you are going to be taking. Can you talk to us about these a little bit? Very briefly?
Thank you. I've already talked about a couple of them. So.
Yes.
At the beginning of this year, Sport Canada put out a call for applications for Sport Canada Athlete Advisory Committee, and I've made the decision to make that a ministerial advisory committee so that the athlete group will advise me directly and I'll be able to get their input. As I've said, an integrated framework, integrity framework for Canada, a review of Sport Canada's funding framework with a view to making it more risk-based, making it tighter compliance, strengthened accountability measures. Well, we stood up the accountability and compliance unit last year. We still have a funding framework, and the two aren't necessarily as integrated as I would like to see them, so we're going to do that work. An international work group on integrity in sport, moving OSIC out of SDRCC. I feel like I've missed one. I'm not sure. But yeah, there's 6 of them, and I think I only got 5. And
Athlete Canada?
Funding to Athletes Can to build organizational capacity.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
I now go to Mr. Lemaire for 2.5 minutes, please. Sébastien.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Minister, clearly you were an athlete for more than 25 years. You were very involved in various activities. You were one of the primary architects of the entire sports mechanism in Canada. You were Minister of Sports in 2015 to 2017. I will present a specific case, Christine Wally's case. You were contacted as Minister of Sports. You did not react. A case was brought before the Human Rights Tribunal because of sexual harassment you suffered from. We are aware of all the procedures involved. Christine had to act alone. Clearly, I think that in such cases, there are limitations. You are entitled. You have the duty of reconciliation, and the responsibilities of the state are required. And you also have to look into the autonomy of sports systems that protected the integrity of the systems and not the victims. How would your response of such a commission help cases like the one of Christine, who had difficulty because of the tribunals?
Case was very difficult, and perhaps I should have intervened more. I think that's all I can say on that, and I apologize if I should have done more. I think we need to better link the systems we put in place with the judicial system. I look at the Australian model, where the Sport Integrity Australia actually is kind of grounded in a policing model, if you will, where there's a direct relationship with the state police that we don't have here. And certainly we don't have those levers in Sport Canada. Our lever in Sport Canada is funding. It's not regulation. I think we need to do a better job to get rid of conflicts of interest in sport.
À quand un projet de loi?
Say that again.
When are we going to have a bill?
Bill. When
Yeah.
will there be a bill?
A bill. Oh, excuse-moi, j'ai pas compris.
Sorry, I did not understand the question. Right now, we don't have a bill.
But certainly I'm open to doing that if that's the best way to do it.
Merci.
Sorry, j'ai pas compris la question.
Sorry, I did not understand your question. Thank you for your efforts in French. That's my Vancouver French. It's very good and highly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire. For the New Democrats, Matthew Green, for 2.5 minutes, please, Matthew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Minister, through your own admission, it seems like you don't have a lot of teeth in terms of outcomes of this commission. So when reports are finished, who is ensuring that the recommendations are followed through with?
Well, the recommendations will be made to the Government of Canada, and I've said that we will respond within 6 months, and the terms of reference will require us to have an action plan. I also think as we go through this that there will be action that happens in real time. So like any other, other process, like a public inquiry, there will be recommendations, and it will be up to all of you and Canadians to hold the government of the day to account to make sure those are implemented.
So when you say action, what do you mean by that? What types of action can you?
Depends what the recommendations are. If, for example, a recommendation was that we need OSIC to be an OIC appointment elevated to the status of the Ethics Commissioner or the Official Languages Commissioner, we could do that. But I don't know what the recommendations will be, so I can't tell you what the exact action could be coming out of it. But
you do acknowledge that absent of regulation, the only tool that you have is funding. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the lever we have in Sport Canada. Is we have no regulatory function. I guess we are
so
a
somebody
government.
as learned as you and who had participated as a minister for quite some time, and in fact, as was referenced by my friend from the block, during some of these tumultuous times, would you not agree then that regulation, being a regulatory body with teeth and the ability to hold directly organizations accountable, is a recommendation that doesn't require a commission, is something that through your experience, that would you not agree that that would be helpful in this moment?
Well, I won't disagree with you that having more teeth and regulatory authority would be a bit of a dream, but
it's not a dream. You're the minister.
Well, but I'm not going to preempt a commission making that kind of systemic change. That would,
Why?
in my mind, because I think that would not be appropriate, given that we
It's
just
not appropriate
announced
for the
the
minister to
commissioner
introduce
yesterday.
legislation that would provide regulation over a sector
Thank
that
you.
has
Would you
created
allow the
harm to its
minister to
athletes.
finish her sentence, please, Mr. Green?
I could reclaim my time. Thank you.
It's okay.
So I'm
He's
asking my
You
question.
should be respectful. Minister, did you want to finish your sentence?
Nope, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
So
You
is it
have
not the case then
30 seconds.
Is it not the case then that as the minister of government, this is the problem I find with the Liberal government, is you act as though you're not in power. You've been the minister of this. You're now back. You have the ability to provide regulation and oversight that doesn't require any of this. And it's also true that recommendations can come from a commission that further enhance your ability to hold people accountable. Do you not agree that that is your prerogative as the minister?
Oh, I can do that for sure. I agree with you.
But you're not doing it.
I'm choosing not to, no.
Okay, I'm happy that's on the record. Thank you.
Go to the Conservatives. Kevin Waugh. Kevin, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister and officials for being here. Your news conference yesterday, you blamed the problems we see today on the sports system. I've been saying for 2 years we can blame it on Sport Canada. I think they threw your former sports minister, Ms. Duncan, under the bus. They're unaccountable to anybody. We have seen this time and time again. The 62 NSOs can go to them with an issue and the accountability stops there. I really have a problem with Sport Canada. And you do too, I know, because you're a former Paralympian. You know the issues with Sport Canada. We don't take them seriously. Any of the 62 NSOs never have. It's an organization, as I said, that are unaccountable, and I think they're going to sink this report, if you don't mind me saying. Your thoughts on that?
Okay, sorry. I thought
Yeah.
I
Well,
wanted to give you time to finish. I apologize. I don't disagree with everything you said. I think that there's a need for strength and accountability. I think there's a need for Sport Canada to get back to the core business of government, which is oversight of the dollars we spend in a sector. And I think that's exactly the direction I've given to the department. But we need to get our house in order. And
So what
I've made that
changes
pretty
have you
clear.
made then as Minister to Sport Canada? Because you know there's a problem there.
Well, we've recently hired a new Director General. We are, as I said, we are integrating the funding. Sport Canada has a funding, a group of individuals that are not trained in compliance and accountability who manage the funding framework. And then we have a separate new group of compliance and accountability. Those two are being integrated so that the expertise in compliance, trying to find different words, in compliance and accountability is going to be not overridden by kind of the sport administration expertise, I would say, with respect, that a lot of Sport Canada officials have.
You see, another problem, Minister, I have is there's 5 or 6 or even 7 sport organizations that really don't need government funding. So you can dangle the carrot to them and say, you know, if you don't do this, you're not going to get federal funding. I can name 6 or 7 of the sport organizations that today don't need a dime from you.
Yeah.
So
I don't think you're
where-
wrong. I mean, that's the problem with the levers we currently have. And that's not, you're not wrong. And I think about that, and I'm trying to.
I can name this.
No, I could name them too. But your point is well taken. If the lever I have is funding and they don't need the funding, what levers do I have?
You have nothing,
Yeah.
right? You have nothing then. And that's the issue, particularly with gymnastics, with Hockey Canada, with soccer. That's the crux. You've just said it. Funding does not fix everything.
And I mean, I've now been at ESDC and PSPC before that, and in any kind of grants and contributions model with stakeholders, the lever you have is the grants and contributions. So if people don't need your money, you can't make them do things unless you have a regulatory body. And I think that is what is needed.
So when Canadians are listening here today, Canadians want timelines, they want fines, and they want legal action. Can this happen?
You mean, can we sue NSOs for bad behavior?
Yeah.
Not right now, no. We can sue them for non-compliance with our funding agreement because that's the contractual obligation we have, relationship we have. And that's not exactly what we would do. We would more kind of cut off funding but your point is so well made. I'm not disagreeing with you about how blunt the tools are.
You have a discrepancy in this country with 62 NSOs. And as I mentioned, 50 some of them are on the verge any day of not in compliance because they don't have the capacity. I can go through those organizations that, you know, your announcement yesterday, and they're kind of sitting back, how are we going to deal with this? We have no people in the office.
Well, I would say a couple things to that. I think part of the challenge for them is we've really heavily laden our funding requirements with things that we actually don't need to make sure that they're providing safe sport. So we've really front-end loaded a lot of paperwork and administration, and part of the exercise of kind of streamlining and risk managing, making it risk-based, is kind of getting through all that noise. And I want to know the 10 things that we need to ask of these people and be able to hold them to accountable for, you know, are they a nonprofit in compliance with the Not-for-Profit Act? Do they have a certain governance structure? Do they have all these policies? You know, I mean, I think there's just things that we can do. I also think that there's an exercise to be done to lessen the number of national sport organizations that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Your time is up. I now go for the Liberals, I go to Michael Couture. Michael?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. Thank you to all the witnesses. You know, we have sat in committee and listened to many, many stories, and I know you know these stories. And it's even the fact that we represent different political parties, we've pretty much been on the same page when it comes to this issue around how do we how do we protect the interest of victims and to create some type of forum where they could be heard, and also accountability to the organizations that, and it's not all sports organizations. There's a lot of good organizations out there, and it's not every individual within an organization, but there's some real rotten culture that exists within sport, and we all know that. And it's been a long process for us as committee members, and I'm happy that there's a forum where victims will finally have a legitimate platform to speak on these issues in a respectful way, where they'll be protected, and I think that's a good thing. But one of the concerns I have, and it's the other piece, it's how do we hold organizations accountable? And I know it's not your job as the minister or us as members of parliament to go out there and arrest people and book them. That's not our part of the process. But how do we ensure that organizations that are rotten at the core, or individuals within that organization, how do we hold them accountable if we can't compel them to come into a commission to actually speak? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So many thoughts. I think what the commission needs to ultimately lead to, I mean, if I could have my ultimate wish here, would be culture change, right? Like, part of the challenge within sport is that not just these egregious instances of abuse that we've all heard about, but a lot of very bad behavior has been normalized in the sports system. And there's a lot of people wearing more than one hat in the system. There are people, it's volunteer driven, it's federal, provincial. Like, these are systemic issues that until we figure out how to streamline the sport system and address these conflicts of interest, we're not going to have the sport we want for our kids. And it's going to be really, really hard. And I think it's going to be demanded by the public. Like, that's going to be the impetus. And I'm hoping the profile of the commission will elevate this, keep it on the radar of the general public, who will and should start demanding better sport. There's a push and pull here, right? So we have Canadians who have participated in the normalization of this behavior, the mockery, the intimidation, the bullying, the teasing, the poor language that just happens. Parents yelling at officials on the rink, parents yelling at other families' kids who are playing on the soccer field. I mean, we don't do this in any other sector in the country. We don't do it in education. I don't walk into my parent-teacher interview and start yelling at the other kid who didn't get the A that my kid should have got. Like, we don't, but we do it in sport, right? Yeah. So I really think the public has to step up and realize that there's some massive culture change needed in this system.
Has there been any conversation with the Minister of Justice in regards to working together, just from advice, to see how the commission can get the best advice possible? If there's obviously trends that are going on with testimony, and there's potential of criminal activity.
Absolutely.
So there will be at least a conversation that will allow for the exploration of how people can be held accountable for their actions? No,
absolutely. Okay. So that's already happened, and that I think that good. I could say confidently that that's baked into how our government is watching this very closely. Because, again, I referenced the Australian model, but there's a very active participation of the police in the integrity mechanisms in Australia that there isn't here, and I would like to see present more here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I want to thank the Minister for giving us an hour, a little over an hour of her time. And I'm going to say you are free to leave unless you want to stay for another hour, Minister. I don't think you do, but we will we will suspend and then go to the second hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
minute round. I'll let the minister leave. That's why we suspend, for people to leave and people to come back. That's a reason for it.
Can we just recess for a couple more minutes? There are people who just want to go for a break.
Yes, people can go for a washroom break if they wish. I'm sorry. All right. Yeah, we've been around for a bit. Okay, so we're still suspended then. Suspend. To thank the officials, and I've named them to you earlier on in this meeting, so I won't go over it again. But we're going to begin with a 6-minute round, starting with Martin Shields for the Conservatives. 6 minutes, Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for witnesses being here today. Interesting couple of days, I'm sure, when things are announced, and you've done a lot of work behind it. I've got a couple of very specific things that I would ask first. There was a call for athletes to be part of a committee, and that now has changed up in title. Were their members, athletes, chosen to be that committee? They had applied. Has that committee formed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, they apply, and there was a pre-selection done, but the final selection has not been made because now the minister wants to elevate the committee to be a ministerial committee. So there will be a reopening of the call. The one that have already applied will be considered, so they don't have to worry. They're already in the name that will be considered, but new people can apply if they're interested because it's a ministerial committee, and then she will make her decision very quickly because she wants to move on with the committee.
So going back to the first call then, what was the criteria for the first call?
So I can turn to my colleague here, Emmanuel.
Criteria will remain the same. So we're looking for athletes that are still active in a national or international body that has retired in less than 8 years from sports. So it's basically the same, and we want it to be as inclusive as possible. So we're looking for a very broad pool of athletes.
And we'll be happy to share the criteria with the committee if that's helpful.
So just in my own mind, you've had that call out, people applied, the criteria didn't change, but you're starting it over again, and those people applied can still be included in that. I'm confused of why didn't you just elevate it to the next level? Okay, guys, now you're on a committee that's called this.
So basically, Madam Chair, is because the minister thought that maybe some people were not interested to be in a committee of athletes with Sport Canada, but they may be interested now that she's taking it under her own umbrella. So she wants to leave the chance to athletes who may not have applied the first one to apply if they are now interested. That's the only reason.
Okay, so it's a distinction of who they were responsible to, under what mandate?
They were going, exactly, Madam Chair, they were going to work with, the athletes were going to inform the policy in Sport Canada, so they were going to work and give us advice, but now the minister wants that advice to come directly to her, and therefore she wants to give the chance to people to reconsider if they have changed their mind and if they want to apply.
What about the responsibilities? Is it a different level of responsibility, is ministerial versus the other? Exactly. What are you looking for?
Basically, the minister will be able to consult them of any subject that she feels like it. All of the change that she has been talking about, I think she will want the input of athletes on those change. So the committee will basically be her sounding board on the different initiative that she's going to move forward.
And again, the criteria was they were a national or international athlete?
So Sport Canada is responsible for athletes at the national level. So the athletes that will be on the committee will be the ones that are active at the national level who have been active in the last year, because some are retired, but they are still very active as former athletes.
And if I can add as well, the criteria were developed with athletes themselves. So we had a committee set up with Athlete Scan and athletes representation, and they came up with those criteria that we'll share with the committee.
So when you say active, you're not necessarily mean active as an athlete, but active in an organization?
They're still either still athletes, they're still active as an athlete, or they retired less than 8 years. I think that was the criteria.
And
so you have to be a recent athlete, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Madam Chair, and some of them are still active on board of organization, or they're still active in other organizations such as AthleteCAD.
Do you have a budget figure for this committee?
The number of athletes or the cost of the committee?
Cost of the committee.
So they are not going to be remunerated, but they're going to be compensated for any cost that they are incurring. So they will be keep old.
Okay. And the number, the last one, yeah. How many on this committee?
Oh, we didn't decide yet. It's still open. It's going to be, we're going to open it, and the minister will decide.
Okay. Going back to another number, and this report, percentage of Canadians, children and youth reporting that they experience sport in a safe environment. That's an 85% number. So how was that 85% number set? Any idea?
So I'm not sure which study you're referring. I'm sorry.
In the department plan.
Yeah.
Listed down here, about 4 steps down. A percentage of Canadians, children, youth reporting that they experience sport in a safe environment. Your target is 85%.
So I will have to verify the source. It's from one of the departmental plan, but normally what we do regularly, we do survey with athletes and we do survey with people who participate in sports. So we do survey almost every year on how people feel in terms of how they feel safe and other questions, and that's probably the result that you're quoting there. Yeah.
My question would be, why wouldn't you have 100%? Why wouldn't your target be 100% of youth feeling safe?
30 seconds.
I think that's what we are hoping to get with all the measures, because clearly there is still a number of people in the system who don't feel safe for different reasons that the minister has mentioned.
I agree. But when you said an 85%,
Sorry,
that means...
Mr. Shields.
Thank you.
Nice try.
Yeah.
Okay.
Always try.
All right.
Thank you.
Now I go to Talib Nur Mohammed for the Liberals. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for being here. And it's good to see you all back. And Madame Sajou, it's good to see you after many years. I actually want to just pick up where Mr. Shields left off, if I might, because I think it's worthy of understanding the difference between 85 and obviously there is in that the implication that there is a gap of people who will not feel safe or be captured. How do we manage that in a way that gives people comfort, that gets these athletes and their families to a place where they feel that they have been done right by? Because I think at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants. You want to make sure that at the end of this process, athletes, prospective athletes, their families, and victims feel that they've been heard and feel that they can look at this and say all of this will have been worth it if nobody else goes through this.
I'm feeling, Madam Chair, to say I think the Minister expressed it very well, that it's required a change of culture in the sports system. There is too many times now a sense of some behavior that are acceptable, whether it's yelling at people or some more severe behavior that the Commission is going to look into. So I think what you're raising is a profound change into what is happening in sport, and that include the sport organization, that include the people who work in sport organization, that includes Sport Canada, but it's also include all parents and also the province. We haven't talked a lot about the province and territory, but a lot of the local club, provincial club are under the jurisdiction of the province, and that's why it's so important, as the minister mentioned, that she's going to raise it at and continue to work with our colleague at the provincial level, because this is a system, and if there is gap in the system, obviously people will not feel safe.
And I think back to.
Sorry, Mr. Mohammed, you've gone well over time. I'm sorry, I just.
No. That was like a minute and a half.
You didn't change it? Oh, I'm sorry. The clerk did not change. I have 8 minutes and 36 seconds here, but I think the clerk is saying he didn't change it.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I'll get that. I'll get all that time back. Then.
Okay.
So I'll get that time back as well. Fine.
All
Okay.
right. Okay.
It's a great answer. I didn't realize it took up that much time. I think back. Look, I think back to 30-something years ago when I played hockey, and I was one of very, very, very few brown kids that played hockey.
Yeah.
And there were things that were normalized then that today we would not even contemplate as being acceptable.
Yeah.
And yet those things still happen, and they happen in a way that perhaps is less overt, but it's still there. How do we make sure through this process that you've articulated, or that we're going to articulate, and that's going to come to life, how do we make sure that those voices who are afraid to be heard in this iteration would be not just comfortable, but would be able to do this in a way that doesn't not just re-traumatize them, but more importantly, doesn't cause them consequences when they go back to sport? Because it's one thing to say we don't want to re-traumatize people, which is a terrible and awful thing. It's another thing when you're re-traumatizing people and then they have to go back to compete, and they have to deal with the stigma of having participated in a process like this. How do you make sure that for current athletes and others that are currently in the system, coaches and others that want to take a stand and do the right thing, how does this process allow them to do that? Or would this process allow them to do that in a way that respects their ability to be able to not just feel safe through the process, but after?
I think that's an excellent question. So the term of reference are clear that issue like homophobia, transphobia, all these other issues are going to come up, and that's why the minister, I think in the term of reference, it was so important that it be inclusive, because there is many forms of abuse in sport, and they take many different aspects. But to your question about how to make sure that they are not re-traumatized when they come back, the Commission will have the opportunity to do in-camera interviews. So if people feel they want to, or they would prefer to have this discussion in camera, the Commission will be able to do that so that they can hear them, but maybe not feel they're going to be, for some reason, publicly retaliate on their testimony. So that's definitely one thing that will be available. But I think the other fundamental question that you're asking is that organizations should allow these kind of discussion. And in the minister testimony, she mentioned the code of conduct that has been imposed on organization. And one of the requirements of the code is to have board representation that is way more diverse. It has to be, no more than 40 representation of one gender, et cetera, and they have to develop a plan to show diversity, because that's where it starts. If the governance does not value diversity, does not promote diversity, does not represent diversity, there is not going to be the change of culture that you're talking about.
Yeah, we're done now. All right, thanks. I now go to Mr. Lemieux, Sébastien, for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Mandu, for being here with us. Tell us, over the years, Sports Canada was criticized. Did you carry out an internal review of the lapses within the organization in your role as guard dog expected of Sports Canada? That's a very good question. I believe that Sports Canada perceived their role differently over the years. Over the years, there has been an evolution. Initially, it was the role of somebody who funded organizations and did its best to manage public funding. But over the years, and with the terrible stories that we heard, we also have to hold organizations to account when it comes to their behavior. And as the minister said, it's through funding. Now, to your question, did we do an internal review? When we came to this committee a year ago, one of the things that was raised was that when we do audits, we do not have a separate team to add another additional layer of responsibility. So now there's money in the 2023 budget to set up that team, which exists in many other departments to make sure that regulations are respected. That capacity did not exist before, so that's one of the observations. We started working on the report card, but we did not have the capacity to implement the report card or the report stringently. It's a long answer. Well, it's relevant what you're saying, so I'll let you go on. You know, there was a clerk who came here, and there are major differences between the public inquiry and the voluntary commission announced yesterday. And there's the capacity to seek documents, to oblige. It's very clear that the independent public inquiry could have been able to review what was done or not done by Sports Canada. Now you've opted for a voluntary mechanism. Would you voluntarily participate and publish the findings that you have mentioned in order to give more accountability? Madam Chair, I'm making a commitment before this committee to fully participate, and Sports Canada will participate with this inquiry. We will provide all the committee needs. The former Judge Conwell, when he did his report, we fully collaborated. I think he did the judge prepared a very useful report, but we are still waiting to see what happened because there were criminal accusations. Now, the minister has come up with two major arguments, funding and the deadlines. Minister Sentonge, on the 11th of May, made some commitments. So 6 months have been lost. If we had started with a public inquiry, we would not have been dealing with this issue of the time limits. I find it strange that we'll be investing abroad on the Safe Sports program, $12 million. But here we are talking about $18 to $20 million for our commission here. Is there no dichotomy between the money we are investing in prevention versus what we're investing to carry out a review? Don't you feel disturbed? Madam Chair, I did not hear the minister talk about the money because I think that the minister said it's going to cost between 10 to 15 million. So it's not an exercise that has to do with funding. I'm happy to hear you say that. Let me ask another question. The Minister Sentonge in May made a commitment to make recommendations. Which of those recommendations are still valid from amongst those ones that were made public? We are working on all the commitments that were made in May. I mentioned the governance code. That was one of the commitments that was made in May. Last week, teams met with all sports organizations to implement the code for the 1st of April 2024. I think the plan of action will come on later, but the code of conduct will start on the 1st of April. All these measures are moving forward. I don't mind sending you an update in writing. Minister Sentonge also made a commitment to make public a Canadian sports policy for 2022-2030. I think a year has gone by. Do you still intend to provide this to sports organizations? Yes, I had a call with my provincial counterparts, and we are looking into an approval process for 2024. The only thing I would say is that people wanted to, among other things, consult indigenous circles. So consultations are ongoing, but I think that it should be approved in 2024 by the minister. Now, the Committee of Athletes, why 8 years? While ignore athletes that have been abused or maltreated over the past 20 years? What are the grounds for your 8-year recommendation? Is there an agreement? Why 8 years? This criterion was developed with the athletes themselves, but it could be reviewed. It's often the case for administrative committees because athletes want the people involved to be active, but that is a consideration that the minister can review if the athletes think otherwise. Thank you. My time is up.
I'm going to go to Mr. Green for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. And I just want to pick up on those very important questions from my friend from the block around the scope. It seems that the pool from which you're drawing with seems to be a little bit shallow. I reference the co-founder of Gymnastics Canada, Kim
I'm
Shore,
sorry, Mrs. Chair, but I don't hear.
I'm sorry?
Can we suspend for a second while we find out what's going on?
I can see myself on the screen.
We cannot hear you, Mr. Green. We can see you, but we cannot hear you. Can you try again and see if we can hear you now?
Sure. Yeah, I'm using.
Just say something, anything.
I'm speaking right now using the appropriate headset delivered to me by the House of Commons, the Jabra Evolve 240.
Thank you. Can you hear? Can you hear him? Can the officials hear him? Thank you. Okay, go ahead. We've stopped the clock. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Well, I would ask that you restart the time, please.
Mr. Green, we have done that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to pick up with the line of questioning from my friend from the block on the scope, and I want to reference Kim Shore, the co-founder of Gymnastics Canada, who also asked about why 8 years and why only national team. They said, Kim states that you're missing the voice of 99% of sports participants. So why so shallow of a pool?
Mrs. Chair, as I mentioned, these criteria were developed with athletes, but I think the minister will be very happy to hear the comment from Madame Shore, and I think will be happy to take that on board as she's moving this committee from a sport committee to a ministerial level. So happy to communicate those comments to the minister.
Okay, and we did. You may have heard my interventions around the ability to send for documents. You're going to be working across multiple jurisdictions. There was a conversation about the challenge within commissions and inquiries to get provincial buy-in. How are you going to remedy that with the commission to be able to send for documents in jurisdictions that you don't have direct control or influence over?
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Chair. So the minister have already met with her colleague in the province, the minister, to encourage them to collaborate and participate. The term of reference also encourage province to participate and collaborate to the commission. I spoke with my colleague at the deputy minister level tomorrow, and in the term of reference, the first engagement the commission will be with province and territory. I have to say, so far the response that we got was very positive and very supportive.
Are you stating for the record here today that you have an agreement in writing from the provincial counterparts that they will be in full compliance? Because what I've heard is encouraged to cooperate. And for the people who are watching that are expecting a full and serious process to happen, that's not reassuring.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's not for me to have the commitment because it's an independent commission. So the commission will engage with the province and the territory and engage with them to fully
but it's a
collaborate.
Terms of reference.
Yeah, it is in the term of reference.
Terms of reference.
Yeah, the term of reference is. Sorry.
Who is responsible for the terms of reference?
Finish her sentence, Mr. Green, please. You ask her question.
I'm asking
let her finish
Madam Chair, and I'll ask them as I
Mr.
see
Green,
fit.
please. We try to be respectful of this committee. Can the witness
Why are you
answer
interrupting
your
me right
question?
now?
I'm not
That's not
interrupting
your
you.
role.
You're cutting
Point
her
of
off,
order.
and she's answering the
order.
question. You have a point of order. I'm telling you, please be respectful of the witnesses,
You haven't
Mr.
heard
Green.
my point of order. My point of order is I'm in the middle of an intervention. I have 6 minutes. I have the ability to move questions along. I have the ability to use what tone I feel appropriate. I have not been disrespectful by asking for answers. And it's not your role as a chair to interrupt my intervention.
I'm sorry, Mr. Green. I think that you ask for a question, you should get an answer no matter how short. You cannot cut through on people. I don't think we do that around here in this committee. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
I'll note that I have 2 minutes and 36 seconds used to this moment. So given that, Ms. Mondu, who is responsible for creating the terms of reference?
So the term of reference were adopted by the government, and so the minister is the one who directs the term of reference.
So if the minister is responsible for the terms of reference, then it would be within the minister's responsibility and purview to direct at least a memorandum of understanding with the provinces for cooperation. Otherwise, I think it's fair for the people who are watching to make the assessment that absent of an inquiry with the powers to demand for documents, this commission is really subject to the cooperation, the voluntary cooperation of its provincial counterparts. Is that not correct?
No, it's not correct, Mrs. Chair. In fact, a commission of inquiry can only compel document from issue under this jurisdiction. A commission of inquiry, unless it was a provincial one, would not have been able to compel document from the province and the territory unless they have themselves accept the term of reference.
And so how will the commission remedy this? You still haven't answered that question.
So the commission will engage as per the term of reference immediately as it's set up, and will see the collaboration of the province and the territory from the get-go. And as I mentioned, the minister have already talked to minister, and she got very positive reaction.
And you're going to ensure that people who are currently under NDAs have confidentiality clauses enforced by the NSOs or the PTSOs, or engaged in complaint processes can safely share their experiences?
Thank you for the question. In fact, NDA are not allowed anymore. If an organization have NDA, they cannot get funding from Sport Canada anymore.
What if a past person is under an NDA? Is it still in force, or are NDAs now null and void across all complaint processes historically?
So there is no NDA for safe sport that are allowed anymore, whether they are past or future. The only NDA that are allowed is for things like not giving technical specification about how you win or how you do better in sport. These are allowed, but no NDA on abuse in sport or thing related to abuse.
Will you at least encourage the commissioner to hold some public hearings for organizations participating in this process so the Canadian public can better be educated about the crisis?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the term of reference is actually that the Commission will hold some public hearing. They will have roundtable. They will have public forum in addition to the survey and the public website that they will create for the public in general. And there will be obviously the National Summit that will also have the benefit of the input from all actors in the sport but outside of the sport that are instrumental to give the recommendation.
And lastly, how do you...
You have 6 seconds.
I have
Mr.
9
Green?
seconds, but that's fine. I'll submit them. Go ahead.
Thank you. Now, we've been sort of sounding out to the committee, and people want to just go with a half of one round. So it'll be for 5 minutes to Conservatives, 5 minutes to Liberals, 2.5 minutes Mr. Lemire, 2.5 minutes Mr. Green. And we won't go with the last two. Okay? Good. Everybody seems to be on the same page here. Thank you. So for 5 minutes, Kevin Waugh for the Conservatives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see the mandate letter to the Minister of Sport and Physical Activity. Minister must ensure a holistic and balanced strategic approach to sport development in Canada that supports the purpose and goals of the Canadian sport policy. December 12th. Haven't seen a policy. Do we have one?
So the policy, it's a federal and provincial policy, so she doesn't control the policy alone. It's a concert effort. I will say that we are 85, if not 90% there. And obviously, in light of the announcement yesterday, the colleague in the province just want to make sure that we still have the right wording. The announcement yesterday talk about human rights, for example, but we are almost there. So you can expect an approval of the policy in 2024 by Minister.
But not 2023. You're saying by 24?
No, I think it's 2024.
Okay. So we're a little delayed on that, but that's fine. So you mentioned the provincial and territorial governments looking at the Canadian sport policy. It's kind of interesting because, you know, it's the jurisdiction issue that we've all seen and heard in other departments in this country. But I see we got health officials here. We're one of the worst countries in physical activity in the world. And it does fall under this minister's prerogative. How are we going to get people active?
Thank you very much for the question, Madam Chair. So we are working very actively in a number of areas. First, supporting and developing public health guidance. So working with organizations like the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology, which issues the 24-hour movement guidelines. Which will continue to be updated. We deliver grants and contributions programs, for example, through the Healthy Canadians and Communities program, $20 million annually. We, as well as Participation, another great example in terms of where we're providing funding. We're monitoring very closely the data, which shows that, yes, physical activity is not as high as we would like. Less than 20% of adults, so that's 18 to 79-year-olds.
I fall into one of those.
Physical activity recommendations. Less than 50% of children and youth. When you look at it in an integrated way, physical activity, sedentary behavior, and sleep, 1 in 10 children meet the recommendation. So we have more work to do, very much focused in terms of monitoring the data, continuing to work through our programming, our guidelines, and as well working with our colleagues in sports, our federal, provincial and territorial counterparts, Indigenous communities. So doing everything possible in terms of bringing the 2018 common vision for increasing physical activity, the Let's Get Moving agenda.
Well, it is, but I mean, how do you monitor this, right? I mean, come on. I used to be a school board trustee. We no longer have phys ed in schools, for God's sake.
I think we still have phys ed in school, knowing one of my children is in
You may have it, but in my division, they don't.
It's not mandatory anymore.
It's not mandatory, right.
So in the space of monitoring and data, and I can turn it to my colleague, but there are a number of areas where we're quite active. There's the physical activity, sedentary behavior, and sleep indicators, which you can find online. Our health info base is the repository of all of that information. We're looking at further advancing some of those indicators, getting more disaggregated, making sure we've got a good pulse in terms of where there are particular populations at risk, and for which we need to continue to support further and refine our policies and programming to get to those particular populations.
You have 5 seconds left.
Thank you.
Kevin, thank you very much. I go to Mr. Noor Mohammed for the Liberals. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 5 hours. May feel like it. I could do it. No.
Hours, yes,
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Look, there's something that I kind of just wanted to clear up for everyone. I may not even take up the whole time, but one of the things that Mr. Green had spoken about was this whole notion about production of documents. And I just want to be very, very clear that we, Parliament, cannot force the production of documents. And I just want to make sure that we are not creating in people's minds a degree of powers that somehow don't actually exist to compel things like the production of documents. Just to clarify what Mr. Green said, and if I misunderstood what Mr. Green said, he'll have the opportunity to clarify that, I think. But what I got from this was that there was this implication that somehow this wouldn't be able to go far enough, we wouldn't be able to get to where we need to do, and somehow we as parliamentarians might have a role in trying to kind of manage this in terms of this notion of the production of documents, going into an athlete's file, or going into a coach's filing cabinet, so on and so forth. So can you just put people's mind at ease as to what powers do exist under these types of commissions, what do not, so people actually understand what we are able to do and what we are not able to do?
So the Commission is going to be able to require any paper that they feel necessary to their work. And that include on a voluntary basis from the province and the territory, because the federal government obviously don't have jurisdiction over the province and territory, but they are going to approach them to collaborate. I will say, in addition, that I think the minister alluded to the fact that if there were some organization that we're funding that she feel is not collaborating, she hasn't taken off the table other measures that she could take, including with her funding power.
And then I have one more question for you, and that's sort of, we've announced the future of this. You've announced the future of Sports Commission, but also immediate actions. One of the things that I want to try to understand is, why are we doing some of these things now, before having seen the findings? I mean, I think this is a very interesting point of view because it presupposes certain things. I mean, the minister said this isn't about if terrible things happen. We know terrible things have happened. So can you kind of take us through the rationale for running some of these things in parallel and what that means and why? And what motivated that decision?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the minister feel, and we all feel, a sense of urgency to take action in some aspect. And for example, she mentioned the transition of OSIC to a more independent body or function, and I think that's something that she has heard from athletes and that she wants to act as quickly as possible. Obviously, if the Commission make further recommendations, these will be taken on board by the government, but all the actions she announced yesterday are things that she feels she can start and work on because she feels that the need is there now.
Thank you very much. And whatever time I have left, Madam Chair, I will cede to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we go to Sébastien for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing each political party to complete their turns. Madam Mondo, my first question, you reacted by saying that the conditions will be announced, and the minister has announced an independent commission. If the minister is the one to constantly determine the terms of reference, how can we trust that the process will be independent, given that he's the primary architect of many things that have to do with our sports system in Canada? Thank you for the question. Maybe I did not express myself well. The public terms of reference will be from the Commission. She will not be changing the terms of reference of the Commission, because the independence comes from the fact that each one of you will ensure that the Commission carries out its mandate independent of the minister. Will there be a declaration of conflict of interest? I'm thinking of the spouse of the minister who works with VIA Sports in British Columbia. They may be linked if we are trying to find out what has to do with provinces. So these are issues that must be made public. So is there a process you're thinking about now? Thank you, Madam Chair, for drawing this to attention. We shall point this out to the minister. Last point, fundamental one. Can you confirm that all sports and multi-sports organizations, like the Canadian Olympic Organization, will really free up athletes and members from NDAs that have to do with athletes? Because right now, what we understand is that there are still many people that have difficulty in the tribunals. So we want a commission that will be able to reflect independently, and we don't want this aspect to be a barrier that will counter the very existence of this voluntary commission. So how will you protect the victims when they testify, and how do you make sure that organizations have removed all NDAs that have to do with athletes? Thank you for the question. That requirement has already been added to our contribution agreements this year, so it's already a condition for funding for organizations. They cannot receive funding if they still have NDAs. So you are saying that they will not have received funding for this month, for this year rather. What's the date? At this point, it's in the contribution agreement. So right now, there should be no non-disclosure agreements. We will follow up on that, because what we've realized is that that's not the case. Some people are still dealing with the NDAs. So we'll like to we'll take note of that, and we'll also follow up.
Green for 2.5 minutes, please. My mic was turned off. Mr. Green, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just correct the record to say that the person that I referenced earlier was actually from Kim Shore, was from Gymnastics for Change. And I would like to go back to the notion of parliamentary privilege and the ability for Parliament to send for documents, quite contrary to what Mr. Nur Mohammed likes to think. I referenced the power of committees to order for the production of documents and records. A report to the Standing Committee on Public Accounts dated December 2009 from the 40th Parliament. On page 3, it says, Parliament is not bound by the Privacy Act and has the right to any documents laid before it which it believes necessary. This principle was established in Canada through the Constitution Act of 1867, which passed the privileges, immunities, and powers of the British House of Commons into Canadian law at the time of Confederation. The power to send for records has been delegated to the House of Commons to its committee in the standing orders of the House of Commons. I would encourage the honourable member to read the standing orders of the House of Commons.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Papers and records.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
But seldom.
Mr. Green, there's a point of order. Please. Sure. Mr. Nur Mohammed.
Madam Chair, for Mr. Green's benefit and for the committee, just to clarify, the point I was making is that they were not the same in the powers.
That is not a point of order.
Well, you're misrepresenting what I said, Mr. Green.
Now, Mr. Green, I think that this committee is well aware of our powers just to get documents, etc. We did it with Hockey Canada. We did it with a lot of the people that we're trying to meet with. So we're well aware. Are you going to ask a question of the
Madam Chair,
officials?
I find it, on the point of order, in fact, I find it troubling that as a chair, you're intervening on behalf of the committee when that is not your role to intervene on behalf of the committee. It is my time to respond accordingly in both questions and comments as it relates to the debate. And again, this is on the point of order that was raised, the non-point of order. To suggest that we do not have ultimate powers to send for documents misleads the public and is contrary to our parliamentary privileges. So if I decide to speak on that, as I'm doing in this point of order, that is my prerogative. It is not for you to direct my line of questioning. So I would like to go
telling you that I think that go ahead, you have a minute and 20 seconds left in your
Fair
time.
Enough. The law clerk provided the committee with a legal opinion that on the powers of committees pertaining to production of documents, the legal opinion summarized the applicability of statutes of Parliament under the Canadian Constitution and cited precedent of the Supreme Court of Canada that Parliament has an adjudicative role as the grand inquest of the nation. The law clerk concluded, in summary, constitutional law has priority over statute law. That is, provisions of a statute, such as the Privacy Act, are to be read in a manner that is consistent with the constitutional laws of Canada, and the Supreme Court of Canada has affirmed that no part of the Constitution, including the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, prevail over any other part of the Constitution, including constitutional powers, immunities, and rights that constitute parliamentary privileges in this House. So, in close, while it might be the position of our Liberal friends in this committee, we in fact do at every standing committee have the power to send for documents. Thank you. I'll cede the rest of my time.
You are over time, actually. Thank you very much to the officials. I think we have ended this session. I want to thank you for your time and coming and explaining so many things to us. Before we leave, thank you very much to the officials. But before we leave for the committee, we have just a small bit of housekeeping. We have a bunch of budgets we got to okay. So we've got a budget on the what was it? The briefing by the chairperson of the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission. It is for $1,250. Do I have an agreement to pass that budget? Thank you. We have another one with regard to the Order in Council appointment of Jean-François Bellil to the position of Director of the National Gallery of Canada, and that's $500. Do we okay that? Thank you. And we've got to okay the amount of $1,250 for the Order in Council appointment of Catherine Tate to the position of President of the Canada Broadcasting Corporation. This is when you call these people up to ask them. You're not okay, thank you, Marilyn. And then we've got the tech giants' current and ongoing use of intimidation and subversion tactics to evade regulation in Canada and across the world. The amount requested on that budget is $21,400. Are we okay with that? And that's it. Thank you very much for that. And so I'm going to, somebody adjourn? And then we have a little bit of Christmas cheer. There's some wine, and we were supposed to have some desserts and goodies, but whatever, guys, there's wine there. I brought it all the way from BC, so let's get some wine going here. And a Merry Christmas to all of you. I'm hoping we're not meeting on Thursday. Thank you. Thank you.
We survived another together.
Okay.